You didn't lose your motivation. It was never yours to begin with. What's collapsing is not your life. It's the outdated version of you that was built on expectations, borrowed dreams, and fragments of other people's definitions of success. There comes a moment in your path, quiet but unmistakable, when your inner world starts whispering, none of this fits anymore. And you try to deny it. You try to go back, to force routines, to push through tasks, to feel excited about things that used to give you that small hit of accomplishment. But nothing lands. Nothing sticks. It feels like everything is slipping through your fingers: work, relationships, goals, attention, even your sense of self. You wake up, and it's like wearing a costume that no longer makes sense. Not because you failed, but because your field is done pretending. You are not broken. You are unraveling. And the unraveling isn't destruction. It's sacred. It's how your soul makes space. Space for the frequency you were born to hold. Space for the path that was chosen before this lifetime began. Space for your real self, the one you felt flickering underneath the noise since you were a child. And when this starts to happen, most people panic. They try to fix it, heal it, escape it, turn it into content. But this time, what if you didn't run? What if the fatigue wasn't burnout, but an energetic no to false timelines? What if the confusion wasn't a mistake, but a redirection to your truth? What if your disinterest in normal life was a divine rebellion? What if you're not meant to return to the old version of you, because that version was never you at all? This is where it begins. When the false version of you begins to dissolve, the first things to fall apart are the illusions. But illusions don't vanish quietly. They crack, they scream, they convince you that you're losing your grip, when in fact, you're finally letting go of what was never real. Suddenly, the conversations that once felt natural feel forced. The career path you were proud of feels like a cage. The relationships you sustained begin to drain you instead of energizing you. And you start to wonder, was any of this ever mine? This question, what is actually mine, is not a mental exercise. It's a frequency shift. A vibrational realignment that starts in your field before it ever makes sense in your mind. And when it begins, your system responds with symptoms. Exhaustion that sleep cannot fix, because you're not tired. You're in withdrawal from identities that no longer belong to you. Apathy toward everything you used to chase, because those things were never aligned with your soul, only your conditioning. Anxiety without a source, not because you're broken, but because your field is detoxing frequencies that kept you locked in a timeline that wasn't yours. Sensory sensitivity. Light feels too bright, sound too loud, crowds overwhelming. You're not becoming fragile, you're becoming clear. A deep craving for silence. Not because you're antisocial, but because the noise of the old world is incompatible with the signal of your soul. These are not malfunctions, they are markers. They are the echoes of a field shifting out of survival mode and into alignment. The collapsing isn't punishment, it's a preparation. And yes, it's messy. Your thoughts may feel scrambled, your sleep disrupted, your sense of time may blur. That's what happens when the external structure loses its power over you. Because you're not becoming less, you're becoming sovereign. And the body knows it. That's why it resists. That's why it rebels. Because it was trained to protect a version of you that could function in the matrix, not the one who came to dissolve it. This is the friction before the flight. And if you're in it now, good. That means you're finally close to remembering who you truly are. You were never meant to play small, but to survive here, you had to. From your first breath, you were plugged into a grid, a collective field filled with inherited beliefs, borrowed fears, ancestral trauma, societal programming. Not all of it was personal. In fact, most of it wasn't. You carried guilt that was never yours, shame that didn't begin with you, dreams that were sold to you, wrapped in words like success and stability, but empty of meaning. The moment you began to remember your truth, that grid began to falter, and the body noticed. The mind panicked, because identity, as you knew it, was fused with the very structures that were now dissolving. The job was never just a job. It was a survival agreement. The relationship was never just about love. It was a contract of validation. The belief system you clung to, it kept you safely invisible in exchange for your light. So when the energy field began to realign, everything built on distortion started to collapse. Not because you failed, because you evolved. You are not breaking down. You are breaking out. And one of the first signs of this, time starts to bend. You forget what day it is. You wake up at odd hours. Moments feel stretched or lost completely. Linear thinking becomes harder. You drift, you loop, you pause, and it makes no sense. But here's the secret. It's not supposed to make sense in linear terms because your energy is no longer linear. It's quantum. You're not just healing the present, you're collapsing outdated past timelines and unlocking future potentials all at once. That's why the symptoms feel disorienting. Your consciousness isn't confused, it's expanding. Your nervous system just hasn't caught up yet. The collective field you were born into, the one designed to keep you compliant, quiet, programmable, is losing grip. You're no longer sourcing identity from it. You're sourcing from within. And that threatens the system more than anything else ever could. Because a being who no longer believes in the illusion can no longer be controlled by it. And that's where you are now. You're not floating in confusion. You're standing in the space between what was and what is awakening. There comes a moment in every true shift where words fail. Not because there's nothing to say, but because the old language no longer fits what you're becoming. You try to explain it to others, but their eyes glaze over. You try to make sense of it in your mind, but nothing computes. Because you're no longer living through thoughts, you're living through frequency. And frequency doesn't argue, it vibrates. At first, you might mistake this phase as detachment. You may even worry you're losing yourself. But what's actually fading is everything you were never meant to be. You begin to lose interest in explaining yourself, in fixing others, in chasing clarity from broken mirrors. Instead, a quiet truth starts pulsing beneath everything. The more silent you become, the more the field speaks. It begins with subtle signals. A conversation that feels like deja vu, a number that repeats until you finally listen. A face you haven't seen in years suddenly appearing in your dream. And just when you start to think it's all random, something clicks. A pattern emerges. A meaning forms. This is not coincidence. This is resonance. You're syncing with a higher algorithm, one not written by society, family, or fear, but by your own soul. And once that link reactivates, everything around you begins to recalibrate. People drop out of your life, not because they're bad, but because their frequency no longer locks into yours. Opportunities dissolve, not as punishment, but to make room for the ones you actually aligned for. And the pain you once buried so deeply, it surfaces now, not to haunt you, but to leave. Because your body finally trusts that it's safe to feel, to release, to reset. The truth is, you're not falling apart. You're falling through the veil. And behind it lies a version of you that was never conditioned, never programmed, never lost. They have been waiting, not just to meet you, but to merge with you. This merging isn't loud. It doesn't require rituals or perfection. It requires presence, stillness, and a willingness to not rush what is sacred. Because when the field rewrites itself, it doesn't use urgency, it uses alignment. Once the collapse is complete, there is a stillness so deep, it feels like the universe itself is holding its breath. And for the first time, so are you. You're no longer reacting. You're not trying to make sense of it all. You've stopped asking, why is this happening? And instead, you begin asking, what am I becoming? That shift alone changes everything. Because now, you're not looking back to restore the past. You're looking forward, sensing the codes of a future that hasn't been written, but already exists in vibration. This is the realm of pre-manifestation, where reality hasn't fully formed, but your field has already chosen, and your job now is not to force it into being, but to match it, moment by moment, breath by breath. You begin to notice the difference between noise and guidance. Not everything you hear in your head is truth, but when your heart speaks, it's unmistakable. It's subtle, never demanding. It speaks in nudges, chills, instant knowings. It's the voice that says, go left, even if logic says right. Wait 3 more days. Say no, even if you used to always say yes. And when you follow it, even when it makes no sense, miracles become your new normal. Not loud ones, not cinematic explosions of fate, but quiet alignments. The stranger who gives you the exact information you needed. The moment you realize what you thought was a mistake was actually precision. This is when you learn the true definition of power. It's not in control, it's in coherence. You don't bend the universe to your will. You align your will with the universe. And that alignment, It doesn't come from ambition, it comes from surrender. Not the kind that gives up, but the kind that gives in to a force that sees further than your fear ever could. You stop needing proof because your presence becomes your evidence. You stop chasing signs because you realize you are the sign. The veil is no longer something to lift. It's something to dissolve. Every time you choose truth over illusion, peace over chaos, alignment over urgency, and as that veil thins, you begin to feel it. You're not here to escape the world. You're here to illuminate it by remembering who you were before the forgetting began. You were never meant to survive the collapse as the same person. Because the moment you chose alignment over attachment, your former identity began to dissolve. Not as punishment, but as liberation. This is the sacred dismantling, where everything you thought you were is stripped away, not to leave you empty, but to reveal who you truly are beneath it all. And this version of you, she's not seeking validation. She's not repeating old patterns. She's not afraid of the silence, because she is the silence. That sacred, steady center, where truth doesn't scream, but radiates. You are no longer at the mercy of the field collapsing, because you are the one collapsing it. You're no longer asking, when will it be over? Because you've remembered, it's not something to get through. It's something to rise into. And now, you don't just walk into your new timeline. You merge with it. Not by pushing, not by rushing, but by becoming undeniably aligned with it. From the way you breathe, to the way you say yes and no, to the way you enter a room without needing to shrink or prove yourself. The portal didn't open out there. It opened in you. And the transmission? It wasn't a message from the skies. It was the remembering of your own frequency, the one you encoded into your field long before you arrived here, the one that awakens now, because you are finally still enough to feel it. So now, you don't just watch your life unfold, you transmit it. With every thought, every choice, every vibration you hold. The world may still look the same, but you are not. And from this frequency, nothing can stay the same for long. You are the shift, you are the collapse, you are the rising. Not someday, now.